What's up, you lovely fucking specimens? It is your boy Rogex here, and we are back at it again to drop What If Deku Was Zoro's... Wait, so this is the wrong intro? Wrong? I'm reading the script wrong? Oh, fuck! Okay, no, jokes aside, but today we will be doing What If Deku Was Zoro's Reincarnation. And with that comes a lot of power. So when you're listening to this what if, kind of just take it with a grain of salt. It's kind of just going to be more for fun rather than like really storytelling, since Deku and Zoro just kind of, it turns way too OP. By the end of the story, you're basically going to be understanding what I mean. So without any further ado, I hope you guys go on to enjoy the video.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Okay, so the story of What If Deku Was Zoro's Reincarnation is all going to be starting in a hospital, the day that Deku was born. Now, when Deku was born, he would be greeted to the world by his mother Inko, Hisashi, and his older sister, Izumi Midoriya. All of them would pretty much just be waiting as Deku is just, you know, a little baby being cradled. Now, Izumi, being Deku's older sister, would be like, Mom, can I hold him? As, you know, Inko would ultimately end up giving, you know, this young Deku over to his sister. Now, she would proceed to basically start holding Deku, saying that she can't wait to, you know, be big sister. And from here, we basically have a gigantic time skip up until when Deku is 6 years old. That sounds like a pretty decent age. Yeah, Deku will be 6 years old. Now, at the age of 6, this is when Deku would have basically ended up growing up into the same person that he would be in the canon. Obviously, he would still be surrounded by friends such as Bakugo, if you could even call it that. And at this current point, he would be in, I think it's preschool or kindergarten, I'm not sure. But at this point, obviously, Deku has already been told that he is going to be quirkless. Now, Deku in this version, it's not like he's the only first quirkless person in his family. His sister Izumi, yeah, she's quirkless too. And with that comes her drive to become the first ever quirkless pro hero. Deku seeing this from his older sister just kind of inspires Deku, because all along he's also wanted to become a hero, and his biggest inspiration is obviously going to be All Might, somebody who can save people with a gigantic smile in his face and never falter when it comes down to saving people's lives. When it comes to Izumi, she just loves a good fight. She loves like what it comes with being a hero, the money aspect, just giving a better life for her brother, her father, everything in general. Izumi just grows up being a very kind-hearted person, just like Midoriya. However, she would actually get bullied a lot less because she would grow up actually pretty strong. When she grew up, she was of course quirkless, but she studied boxing, and that's what she ended up trying to do in order to become a hero. Just be a physical combat one. And with that comes a lot of training. So Izumi was never really able to hang out with Deku a lot, but the times that she was, they would share some very special moments together, with Izumi always being there for her younger brother. Anytime that Bakugo would pick on Deku, she would always come in and say, hey, leave him alone. And Bakugo, knowing and kind of fearing Izumi, would also just be like, oh, okay, don't worry, I'll leave him alone. And you know, that's kind of just the relationship that Deku and Izumi would have. However, this would all change when one day, sadly, Izumi would die. Now, she would die in an incident alongside her father Hisashi Midoriya, where all of them are pretty much in a car, you know, in their car ride, and by all of them, I mean Izumi and Hisashi. Now, it's at this point that Izumi would basically be getting picked up from school. Now, Hisashi on this day, Deku would have been sick, because if it wouldn't have not been for that, Deku would have also been in the car. And Izumi was just driving home with Hisashi when out of nowhere, there was a villain attack. A gigantic villain would come in out of nowhere, as it would cause one of the cars to start losing, you know, control of itself and spin out of control. This would cause into a two-way collision, which would cause Izumi and Hisashi to unfortunately die in the hospital. By the time that Deku and Inko arrived, Izumi would look at Deku's direction as she would smile and tell Deku to live his life to the fullest. Now, Deku would see his sister Izumi close her eyes as her hand would fall out of his hands, and he would lose his big sister. Immediately, Deku would begin to break down into tears as Inko holds Izuku and tells him that everything will be okay, while she herself breaks down, just showing the loving care of a mother, that of Inko. As Deku just realizes that this is the reality of the situation, for the following weeks, Deku would feel awful, and Bakugo would actually leave Deku alone for quite a bit, just to, give him some time in order for the bullying to finally start. Bakugo, knowing that, Inko and Deku were going through, would really leave Deku alone for a little bit. And well, during this time, Deku would essentially be with his mother Inko, as he would ask his mother if she believes that he could become a pro hero, just like his sister Izumi wanted to be. Now Inko, hearing this, would immediately look towards Deku, as she would, like, with a tear in her eye and like with a smile as well as a lot of pride in her eyes, would turn towards Deku as she would say, "You can become the greatest hero for your sister and for yourself." Deku would look at his mother as he would quickly be embraced by her, and for the following next couple of weeks, Deku would essentially try to do boxing, you know what I mean? Deku would pretty much be put into a boxing school, but Deku is immediately just doesn't like the art of boxing. He doesn't feel as if it's going to be something that he'll really enjoy. And so Deku gets out of the school about 1 week later. This is when Deku would find himself watching a movie about swordsmen. And when Deku sees these swords clashing against each other and sees just the way that these swordsmen just move and act, Deku would just be completely enthralled by how awesome everybody looks. Deku would smile as he would think that that's what he wants to do. Deku would ask Inko if, she can buy him a sword, and Inko would say, "That's pretty dangerous, don't you think?" Deku would look at her as he would say, "Please," and Inko would immediately just kind of be like, "How could I say no to that face?" She would work for a couple of weeks, and this is when she would finally get a little bit of extra bucks in order to buy Izuku that sword. However, they'd be low on money for a bit, and Deku wouldn't even be able to go into some sort of fancy school for how to train him in using swordsmanship. So instead, Deku would resort to YouTube, watching videos on how to use a sword, and for the following years, Deku would simply start training in the art of swordsmanship, instantly falling in love with the craft, and obviously being very talented and gifted at it. A couple months after, Inko would end up instilling Deku with, not instilling, but putting Deku inside of like a swordsman school, a place where Deku can learn how to use the blade. And so Deku would spend the following couple of years just basically trying to perfect this craft. For his entire middle school year, however, Deku, instead of just simply staying at where, he would usually stay at, just, where living with his mother, with her working 2 jobs, and Deku just going after school to train in swordsmanship, instead, what Deku would do is essentially go off. Because during this time, Deku, while yes, has grown very powerful, Deku acknowledges the fact that with the power that he's accumulated so far, he won't make it very far in the, the industry of being a hero. So Deku would decide that, he definitely is going to be needing to up the antics of his training. Very soon, Inko would actually ask a couple of, people in the mountains to actually end up training Deku. And this is when Deku would spend the following his middle school years essentially training up in the mountains, trying to perfect his craft during his middle school years. Where during this time beforehand, Deku had ended up just gaining a sort of weird respect from Bakugo. Bakugo used to remember the way that Izumi was, how powerful she was, and how her simple drive was something that powered her to become as great as she was. And Deku acknowledges this as well. And so seeing the same willpower inside of Deku honestly kind of made Bakugo have some sort of level of respect for Deku, leading to Bakugo not really bullying Deku anymore and kind of just stepping away from Deku. For the following years, Deku didn't really experience too much bullying from Bakugo other than, some occasional teasing, but that was really it. That's really common in schools. And so Deku just proceeded to grow up as normal, training in the swordsman style and actually learning his own style, the 3-sword style, something that Deku loves to use a lot. That being said, this is when Deku would spend those 3 years trying to perfect this craft. And by the end of this, Deku would have actually ended up getting to about the same power level that Zoro has when we first met him. Alright, at this point, Deku is very much powerful. He has a good amount of attacks in his arsenal, and he also has one more thing in his belt: observation haki. Now, before you hear this and think, observation haki? Mans is tripping, bro. Why are you making him so OP off rip? Well, hear me out. So, obviously, observation haki is not going to be like this thing that has full mastery. Deku does know how to use observation haki, but he doesn't exactly know what haki is at this point. It's not like those people up in the mountains were able to teach him haki, because they simply don't have it, right? Deku was also born with Conqueror's Haki, but he's probably not even going to be needing it during the entirety of this series, so probably won't need to mention it, but you know, it might come up towards the end of it. That being said though, we would basically have it to where Deku just honestly continues training, and during his time training, one time he ended up basically slightly being able to predict his opponent's moves, noticing that he was able to read his opponents like a book using observation haki. With this came an exponential amount of growth for Deku during these couple of years that he spent training up in the mountains, where Deku ended up gaining so much strength. Like, it's incredible how strong Deku got compared to how much of a weakling Deku was when he first got there. And at this point, Deku just became, well, extremely powerful. During this time, Deku would essentially return back to civilization, where Deku would basically see his mother Inko. And during this time, he would have about 1 week in order to basically prepare for the entrance exam. And you want to guess what Deku does? He literally spends this entire time sleeping, doing nothing but sleeping it off. Like, he would quite literally just sleep this entire time, and this is when finally the UA entrance exams would come in. When they arrived, Deku would simply grab his 3 swords, as he would have actually registered them in UA saying that he is quirkless, and so they would allow him to take in the swords. With this, Deku would go on in there as he would proceed to just bump into some girl with brown hair. Immediately he would turn to her as he would say, "Oh, sorry, just, you know, I have a really bad sense of direction." And she would say, "Oh, no, it's fine." As she would just turn towards Deku and they would have a conversation. She would say, "Isn't it crazy how this test is about to, you know, determine how our lives go for the rest of our existence?" As Deku's like, "Yo, that's kind of deep." And Uraraka would just say, "Oh, yeah." As at this point, Deku would basically just turn towards Uraraka as he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just see you on the other side." Uraraka would smile, as Deku isn't some shy person who's afraid to talk to females. If anything, Deku isn't afraid of anything at this point. Might as well be called the Demon Zoro, because the man is already OP. So we will basically have it to where Deku goes in there and he ends up taking the written portion of the exam, sitting relatively close to Bakugo, seeing as they end up going to the same school. And even though they weren't technically going to the same school at the time, Deku did of course end up getting his middle school education out of the way in the mountains, where, you know, he kind of just ended up sitting next to Bakugo, took the test, aced it, and made it outside. When Deku did go outside, he would immediately take note of 2 people who looked like they might be pretty powerful. One boy with blue hair with engines in his leg, and another with golden hair. This boy would have a little black mark in his hair with the sign of a lightning bolt, as Deku would think that that's quite interesting. Now, in case any of you guys are wondering what Deku looks like, he essentially looks like a mixture of Deku and Zoro at the same time. And if you guys have seen the thumbnail, Deku keeps his hair short for now, and he basically just he likes to rock his hair a little short, and he reps like the OG Zoro costume. Actually, yeah, he's just repping the OG Zoro clothes, because that's pretty much what Deku's been wearing up in the mountains for so long. And so Deku would honestly just be getting ready for the entrance exam, just breathing in and out and kind of just like sitting down on the floor, pretty much napping. Until finally he would hear a voice say, "Go, go, go! What are you waiting for? There's no countdowns in a real battle." Immediately, Deku would stand up a little groggily and he would basically just rush over towards the gate, to which Ida would actually be shocked. As Deku starts speeding up, he would notice that Deku actually surpassed him in terms of where he was in the lead of the race. Deku would immediately rush on in there, as he would just go over to a bunch of robots and begin to slice them all down, cutting the robots in little pieces using a bunch of Zoro's different techniques. Now, I could honestly go into this and just start saying random Zoro, you know, abilities and just slashes and stuff like that. But I honestly think that the one that I will actually say and take into account is that Deku would use the Great Dragon Twister a whole lot in order to basically take out a large amount of robots in at once. You know, he would use this attack a lot, as well as, you know, using a bunch of other random slices attacks, obviously relying a lot on his 3-sword style to simply rush at robots one at a time, slicing them, ripping off their heads with his sword, and just rushing at a bunch of different directions. At one point, Deku would jump off of one robot, slashing the head off, as he would do a backflip midair, throwing 2 swords at different robots as they would pierce straight in them and blow up. The swords would immediately, like, from the explosion would be like pretty much jumping over towards his direction, catching them in midair as he would just continue rushing at a bunch of more robots as he would just take out hordes and hordes of robots at once. When Deku was doing this, he would catch the attention of a lot of pro heroes who are actually watching the entrance exam take place. And a lot of people would be very shocked at Deku's power and abilities. A lot of people would be wondering what this kid's quirk is. As they would read up his files, they would end up finding out that this kid doesn't even have a quirk. And hearing this would actually cause all of them to be pretty shocked, thinking that this kid doesn't have a quirk. How is he doing this? But in all honesty, they would just be like, whoa. And Deku would just continue blowing up robots left and right until eventually 10 minutes would pass and Deku would have already racked up a grand total of 479 points. With this comes Deku pretty much hearing a huge amount of rumbling from the distance. And when Deku hears this, he would proceed to essentially just turn away as he would see this gigantic monstrosity of a robot. Immediately Deku would smirk as he has one blade in his mouth, and he would smile thinking that finally something to give me a challenge. He would begin to rush at the direction as Ida would run past Deku thinking, what is this kid doing? And Deku would jump up into the air as he would simply just be like, oh yeah. But right before he's about to go in to attack the zero pointer, he would hear a yell saying, help! Deku mid-air would pretty much just be like, as he would pretty much just stop himself and like, not stopping himself mid-air, but he would land back on the ground as he would see that the zero pointer and himself are pretty, they're at a pretty good distance still. So Deku would rush over towards Uraraka as he would say, here, let me help you get up. He would throw the rubble off of her and ask her if she's fine like that, but she would say that her ankle hurts. Deku seeing this would just be like, all right, go grab on. As Uraraka would put her, her shoulders and everything on top of Deku, and Deku would begin to run. As he has Uraraka on his back, he would begin to run full speed as he would say, is there a medic around? And everybody would turn towards Deku's direction as they're like, we don't know. Immediately, this short woman with gray hair would come in and she would say, oh yeah, right here. Just leave the girl right here. Deku would drop Uraraka off, and this is when there would be about 7 seconds left of the exam. However, the zero pointer is still not stopping, and Nezu is actually just about to turn the zero pointer robot because it's getting pretty close to the rest of the contestants. However, this is when Deku would proceed to say, I can't wait to take this thing out. I've been saving this move for someone just like you. As he would say, Purgatory, Onigiri! As, in case any of you guys heard that voice crack, I do apologize. He would say Purgatory, Onigiri, as he would basically proceed to rush at the gigantic zero pointer, and with all of his blades, he would slash at it. As the gigantic explosion that would ensue afterwards would be massive. After Deku slices at the gigantic zero pointer, a gigantic explosion could be heard, which would catch a lot of the people who were actually competing to get, the zero pointers and all that stuff off guard. A lot of them would just be like, yo, what is going on? You know what I mean? And so they would honestly just be in shock, right? This is when Deku would proceed to essentially look at all of the robots and everybody who's just staring down at him, as he would pretty much put all of his swords back in their sheaths and just walk off, with him saying, I'm pretty tired. He would then basically begin to get picked up by Inko, as she would say, why is everybody staring at you, Izuku? Deku would say, I don't know, let's just go home. As Deku would pass out in the car, and Inko would try to, carry Deku up into their house, just like she did when he was a kid, but she would immediately realize that Deku is a whole lot of muscle, and a lot of lean muscle at that. So she would just say, Deku, could you come up here? As Deku's just like, oh yeah, sorry. He would get up and he would just go over to his bed. As he would drop there and just be like, just passing out immediately, starting to pretty much snore. Inko would be like, that kid. As she would proceed to make dinner, and a couple of hours later, Deku would be woken up by the smell of food. As Inko would say, Izuku, dinner's ready. Izuku would basically go out there, as we would have Deku and Inko just having a gigantic feast, where she would say that she's proud of her son for how far he's come. And Deku would say that, thank you to his mother, as he would pretty much tell her that not a lot of people would allow their kids to go out and train in the mountains for as long as she did. But he would look at her as he would think, but I'm truly thankful you did. Because if it wasn't for that, I would have never gotten as strong as I did, and I would have never pushed myself to these upper limits that I'm at now. Thank you, Mom. He would immediately hug his mother, as she would start tearing up and saying that his big sister Izumi would be so proud of him, with him saying that he would love to make her proud as well. saying that he's going to become the #1 hero just for her. And this is when about 3 days would go by, when Deku would get his entrance exam letter by the school, and Inko would actually be walking by his room, as she would basically sit there as she would hear the letter alongside Izuku. She would say, "Play it, Izuku." Deku would grab the letter from UA, as he would just put it in like a little thing, and this is when the thing would start playing, right? It would immediately say, "Congratulations, Midoriya," as it would begin to pretty much explain how Deku destroyed All Might's previous record with a groundbreaking number of 669. That's literally the score that he ended up getting. Now, when Deku hears this, he's like, "Yo, like I got a pretty big score." As Inko was just like, "You broke All Might's record?" Deku would say, "Yeah, mom, what's the shock?" As she would just be like, "How?" And immediately a clip of Deku just devastating and destroying robots would play, as All Might would simply say, "Welcome to your hero academia." Inko would just drop down to the ground, as All Might would say, "Oh yeah, sorry, one more thing. You also have a scholarship, a full ride to UA. We saw that you're struggling financially and decided we might as well give out a scholarship to one of the most qualified people." As All Might would just throw a thumbs out and smile as he would say, "Welcome to UA." Immediately, Deku and Inko would start jumping up and down, saying that, "Woohoo! Money's not going to be a problem." And Inko would say, "You got a scholarship?" You know, she'd be freaking out, thinking that, oh my god, like this deserves like some praise. And they would go out to eat to a fancy restaurant where some guy would cook in front of them, and Deku would just be having the time of his life with his mother, just being happy at how proud he made her. The same day, they would end up visiting his sister Izumi's grave, where Deku would simply pay his respects and drop off a new pair of flowers, saying, "Hey sis, sorry I haven't been able to come by in a long time, but I figured I'd come tell you how things are going. Currently I got into UA, your dream school, remember?" He would chuckle as he would say, "Yeah, he used to talk about it a lot, but I made it. And this is for us, both of us, not just me. But I'm gonna complete your dream through myself. Your will has been passed down to me. I'm gonna make you proud, big sis." He would simply smile as he would walk away from the grave, and a sort of spiritual projection of his sister would just be smiling with his father Hisashi, since of course he went to pay his respects to him as well. This is when Deku would kind of get the blessing of both his sister and father, as Deku would walk off like kind of invigorated with a new power. And this is when Deku would basically proceed to essentially pass out, until he would essentially finally have his first day at UA, where as soon as he arrives, Deku would be like, "Where do I go?" And immediately he would actually have to be walked over to his first class by a third-year student by the name of Nejire. And when Deku sees Nejire, he would immediately be like, "Yo, like, can you help me?" As Nejire is like, "Oh, you're a first year, right?" Deku would look at her as he would say, "Yeah, kind of lost, can't find my class." Nejire would say, "Oh, you're in class 1A. She would say, "That's great, I can walk you there right now. I was actually there." She would say, "Yeah, Aizawa might seem like a little bit of a hardhead, but once you get to know him, you'll love him." As you know, Deku would just say, "Oh, thanks," and he would just walk inside thinking that was a pretty nice girl. When Deku walks into the classroom, he essentially just sits down, as he would see a very familiar face saying, "Bakugo?" Bakugo would turn towards Deku's direction and say, "Izuku, it's been a long time." He would immediately stop arguing with Ida, as he would turn towards Deku and say, "Bro, how have you been?" And since many of you guys are wondering, you guys might be like, "Yo, didn't Deku sit relatively close to Bakugo?" Yeah, he sat close to him, but you know, not close enough to the point where they had any interactions at all. So when Deku sees Bakugo, he's like, "Yo, you're in my class?" Bakugo would chuckle as he would say, "Yeah," as they would just start smiling, you know, having a great time, honestly. They're just both happy at the fact that they're both in the same team together. And Deku would smile at Bakugo's direction as he's like, "Let's go, man. It's gonna be fun having you in my class." As they're both having a blast, and this is when suddenly a yellow like looking beanbag thing would stand up, as it would be Aizawa groggily saying, "If you're here to make friends, I suggest you leave now. It took you guys over 8 seconds to quiet down, you troubled children." This is when he would say, "Put these on and meet me outside." Deku would immediately just grab the thing, and he would meet Aizawa outside, questioning nothing at all. As Bakugo would say, "Who is this guy?" Immediately Bakugo would say, "My name is Aizawa, and I will be your homeroom teacher." As Deku would be like, "Wait, Aizawa, the pro hero what's it called? Pro Hero. Wait. What is Aizawa's Pro Hero name? Oh yeah, Eraserhead. Yeah, he would say, "Are you Eraserhead, the Pro Hero?" As Aizawa would be like, "Yeah," and everybody in the class would be like, "Wait, that's Aizawa?" As everybody would just be a little shocked, but Aizawa would immediately say, "Meet me outside now." As everybody would just be like, "Oh, okay." As they would grab their stuff and go to the locker room. When Deku was in there changing, he would be noticed by Kirishima, as he would say, "Yo, Deku, dude, you are ripped," saying that is such a manly physique. Deku would thank Kirishima, saying that, he's not too bad off himself. As Kirishima would say, "Nah, dude, I'm trying to get like you." Deku would turn towards Kirishima and in Jim Bro fashion would say, "Nah, I'm trying to get like you." As they're just both complimenting each other back and forth. And Bakugo would just be sitting there like, am I just like not here? Deku would turn towards Bakugo as he would say, "Yo, dude, you got way more ripped than what I remember you." As Bakugo would say, "Thanks, man." And Kirishima would also say that Bakugo's physique is pretty good. This is when they would all meet Aizawa outside, as they would proceed to have the quirk assessment. Now, when it comes to the quirk assessment, I'm not even going to bother mentioning what happens. Just know Deku breaks a whole lot of records, destroying the grip strength, jumping over the whole entire thing. The race is child's play for Deku. The ball throw, don't even get me started on the ball throw. Just know Deku is very, very powerful. And when the quirk assessment finally ends, Deku quite literally ends up being in first place, meaning that Deku doesn't have to worry about getting expelled. However, luckily Aizawa was simply playing, and nobody ended up getting expelled in this version of events. And so we basically have an interaction where Momo was just like, "What, you guys didn't know that?" Like, clearly he was joking, but No, he wasn't. He was being pretty serious, if I, say so myself, as everybody just proceeds to smile, thinking that, oh, thank God, as immediately everybody would just proceed to be like, "All right, so what's the first order of business?" This is when Aizawa would say, "Just meet me here tomorrow," as he would just walk off and literally go into his classroom, as he would pass out in there, literally like not leaving in the classroom until nighttime, where he finally had to start doing some hero work, and everybody would go off home, meeting at school the very next day. This is when Deku and Bakugo would end up basically meeting each other in the front gates of UA. Not exactly inside of the classrooms, but at the front gates, where Bakugo would walk alongside of Deku, and Deku would actually lead them to be lost, with Bakugo saying, "You still can't find anywhere," as he would say, "Let's go to class." He would basically tell Deku to walk in this direction, and when they arrive, they basically end up seeing All Might. As they walk in after All Might finally got there, and All Might is just saying, "I am here," walking in like a normal person. As he would see Zuko and Bakugo walk in, he would say, "Oh, latecomers, just come inside." He would say, "Don't worry, just take a seat." They would take a seat next to each other, as All Might would explain to them that they're going to be having the Heroes versus Villain event, opening the wall, as he would say that if he does say so himself, the clothes definitely make the pros, as all of them would be revealed, their costumes, and all of them seeing these just really cool looking costumes would smile, thinking that, "Yeah, this is about to be awesome." Immediately, All Might would explain what the Heroes and Villains event is, and this is when All Might would begin to explain to the students that they are going to be facing each other in combat. Deku and Bakugo would get pumped for this, as they would say, "I can't wait to fight you." As Bakugo and Deku would look at each other and say, "Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how strong you've gotten, Deku. You better have actually gotten strong with that sword of yours and not simply been twiggling around like a little stick." As Deku would smirk, thinking that, oh, he has no idea. But this is when All Might would pull out a sticker, as it would say Izuku Midoriya and Bakugo Katsuki. This is when he would say, "You two are on the same team." And Deku would turn towards Bakugo, as he's like, "I'm cool with that." They would both dab each other up, you know what I'm saying? Is they're just like, "Who are we fighting?" Deku would say, "I hope we fight that one over there," pointing towards Todoroki's direction, saying that he gives off a pretty powerful aura, with Bakugo saying that he actually hopes they fight some other kid over there, pointing towards Kirishima, saying that he wants to know what he's about. Deku and Bakugo would just be pretty, excited for who they're gonna fight, until All Might pulls out the raffling ticket or whatever, saying that their opponents are going to be Mineta and Invisible Girl. When Bakugo and Deku hear this, they're like, "What?" As they look towards Mineta's like small frame and Invisible Girl, who is just like, "Please no, anybody but them." As Bakugo and Deku just fall to the ground, thinking that this is about to be so lame, and Mineta and Invisible Girl would just be like, "Yeah, we don't want this." Like, they'd be freaking out, saying, "Can we maybe get another match?" With All Might saying not to worry, to simply do their best. And Deku and Bakugo would actually play the role of villains. Now, When they're doing this, Invisible Girl would simply say that, oh, that's perfect. With her invisibility, she can easily sneak in there and touch the bomb. And Mineta would actually be thinking that that's a great plan. So that's pretty much what they do. Mineta and Invisible Girl hatch a plan to which Mineta opens the door and tries to distract them, and Invisible Girl walks in by taking off her gloves and shoes, essentially just showing that, she's not there. And when Mineta opens the door, he's like, I'm gonna take that bomb and save, everybody, just trying to play the role of a hero. And Bakugo and Deku would turn towards him with menacing looks on their faces saying, you hear a word from him, Deku? Deku would turn towards Bakugo and say, nah, I didn't hear a thing from this squirt. As they would both turn towards Mineta, who was just terrified, like, guys, I don't actually want any trouble. Guys! And this is when, Invisible Girl would be trying to walk past Deku, but Deku would immediately like stick his arm out as he would grab Invisible Girl by the throat saying, where do you think you're going? As he would toss her onto the ground, and Invisible Girl would just be like, how could he? As immediately Deku would smile as Bakugo would just give off a menacing glare and say, die! Going to try to throw an explosion, but before he can even throw it, he would simply grab out some tape as he would surround it around the two people, saying that, they don't even deserve his explosions. As Bakugo would burst in a gigantic laughter, with Mineta and Invisible Girl being like, hey, that's not funny! After this, they would end up going towards the area where they get to watch everything that goes on, and we would basically just have Deku and Bakugo just watching every other event unfold, with them saying that they can't wait to fight Todoroki and each other. And after school, Deku would go home as he would pass the F out. Okay, so after Deku would pretty much wake up, we're going to essentially just skip a little bit into the future, the day where they're all heading to the USJ. Obviously, they were all given permission slip, which they all had to pretty much give to their parents to sign, to let them go on to the USJ trip. Now, when they were all on the bus, they were pretty much all discussing who the strongest in the class is, but that's irrelevant. However, one thing that isn't irrelevant is Hero 13's amazing, beautiful speech on what it takes to become a hero and how quirks are dangerous, because nobody knew that, They really needed to be told this, you know what I'm saying? Because, they were completely unaware that quirks were dangerous. I mean, in the wrong hands, then someone could be a villain. I mean, I never thought about it that way, but, it's just, man, what a philosopher. But anyways, with that being said, all the kids would obviously just sit there and listen to, Hero 13's thing about quirks. However, when she's talking about that, she would turn towards Deku's direction and she would see that Deku's not paying attention. And that's because Deku doesn't have quirk, plain and simple. He doesn't have a quirk, but he does have something way more powerful than that. He's Zoro's reincarnation. That is more than any quirk in the My Hero Academia can offer him. And so we basically have it to which Deku would proceed to essentially just kind of sit there with, his hands crossed as he's just looking at 13, kind of just nodding his head, pretending to care, as out of nowhere a purple mist would arrive in front of all of them. Immediately, Bakugo would jump into action saying, a villain! He would jump up into the air as he would say, I'm gonna impress everybody. He'd throwing an explosion. However, he would go straight through Kurogiri, and this is when he would proceed to essentially shoot all of them into the same locations in canon. Everybody who was originally taken to a certain area in the normal version of My Hero would of course still be teleported to a different area, with Deku landing on the bus, no, not the bus section, but the water section. Now, when he does land, he would of course be taken by Tsuyu, who would end up saving him when he's falling into the water from the deep depths of a bunch of villains. Deku, however, was already literally fighting against villains in the water who actually ended up rushing at him, and Deku was literally like slicing in the water, cutting a couple of villains, like literally causing the water to be filled with a little bit of blood, as a bunch of people would just really rush at Deku, and Deku would honestly just be fighting off a bunch of villains till Tsuyu saves him. One quick thing I do want to say, guys, in case there is some background noise from here on out, I do apologize, seeing as my family is not home, and for the first half of the video, they weren't. But that aside, they would all basically proceed to, get on top of the boat, where Deku would ask everybody for what their powers are. Tsuyu would explain that her abilities are pretty much that of a frog, with Mineta saying that he can throw, but Deku would stop him as he would say he understands his powers. Deku would ask Mineta how his sticky balls work, and Deku would ask Mineta to pretty much just explain that to him. Deku would say, alright, I think I have a perfect idea. Deku would jump up into the air as he would say, when I say go, Tsuyu, you jump up into the air as high as you can, grab me with your tongue, and Mineta hold on to Tsuyu. And so, that's what they would do. Deku would jump off of the boat as he would say, ah! Immediately just kind of slashing at the water. Now, the reason that I said just straight up scream, is because I honestly could not think of any just straight up ability that would immediately cause a gigantic whirlwind. So I'm just going to be saying that Deku would quite literally just slash into the air, creating such huge wind pressure that it would cause the water to just have a ripple effect, causing all the villains to pretty much just be taken in, and Mineta would throw his balls like crazy. When they would land, Deku would be greeted to the sight of Aizawa getting his head bashed in by the Nomu, as Deku would say, I gotta go help him. Immediately Tsuyu and Mineta would say, we can't, we gotta wait for the heroes, but Deku would say, we are the heroes. And immediately he would rush off as he would look at Aizawa and say, I'm here to help. Immediately Deku would stand in front of the Nomu and Aizawa, as Deku would say that this beast doesn't even turn his attention towards Deku, as he would stare right at the Nomu and grit his teeth. He would immediately think that this thing needs to be taken down immediately, as Deku would say, two sword style, Toro Samon, as he would basically proceed to turn his attentions towards the Nomu, as he would rush at him and with two blades would slash at the Nomu. Immediately, Deku would realize that the Nomu's skin is extremely hard, and Deku would have definitely jabbed his swords pretty deep into the Nomu, but the Nomu's skin would be extremely hard. Think like when Inosuke stabbed one of the lower moons. You remember that scene where Inosuke pretty much ended up like stabbing into the gigantic demon thing, and he wasn't able to cut through it? That's pretty much a scene very reminiscent to what happens here. Deku, realizing this, would try to rip his swords off, but the Nomu would punch Deku away, and Deku would be flung back. Deku would look towards the Nomu's direction as he would say, that thing is strong. He literally got hit right on the sides of the ribs, as Deku would stand up coughing blood as he would smirk and wipe the blood off of his face. He would pretty much proceed to turn towards the Nomu as he would say, oh, you're done. Deku would smile as he would look at the Nomu's direction, as the Nomu at this point has already dropped Aizawa. And the Nomu would simply let out a gigantic roar, as Shigaraki would say, Nomu, kill that brat. Instantly, the Nomu would rush at Deku at blinding speeds, as Deku would simply say a couple of words, these being Purgatory, Onigiri. He would blitz at the Nomu with all three swords in hand, as he would proceed to pretty much, wait, I did say that the Nomu pretty much took the swords because they were jammed into him. I'm just going to be saying that Deku was able to rip them off, right? Deku ripped them off as Deku would blitz at the Nomu and say, Purgatory, Onigiri, as immediately Deku would appear behind the Nomu, and the Nomu in that little instant that the Nomu and Deku rushed at each other, Deku felt a strange power coursing through him. Similar to that of when he can see movement coming, he basically used his observation haki to essentially see where the Nomu was going to strike. So Deku avoided that and proceeded to strike at all the Nomu's vital areas. Deku, after slicing off the Nomu's arms and both legs, would look at the Nomu as it's on the ground and all of it was completely severed. Deku used armament haki on his blades because the simple fact that Deku was pushed, because of the simple fact that had the Nomu actually landed that blow, Deku would have definitely died. Deku was very powerful, but a full power blow from a Nomu was definitely going to be injuring Deku, if not killing him at this point. And so after Deku slices at the Nomu, Deku would simply look back at the Nomu as he would see as its head is just screeching out. Deku would look over towards it as he would stomp on the Nomu's head, saying that serves you right. He would then turn towards Aizawa as he would have just this angry, menacing, demonic look on his face, turning his attentions towards Shigaraki, as he would proceed to essentially say, Great Dragon Twister, as he slices in the air with all three of his swords, and he would proceed to basically cause Shigaraki's body to be flung into the air and have a bunch of little cut marks all over himself. As Shigaraki was in the air, Kurogiri would teleport, catching Shigaraki mid-air and getting out of there with nothing else. The Nomu afterwards would basically simply lay there, as the Nomu's body would pretty much just be sitting there lifeless, and Deku would proceed to simply stand there as he would stand victorious over the Nomu, proud of what he had just accomplished. At this point, Deku would essentially proceed to do his thing, essentially just walking over to Aizawa, as he would help Aizawa up by putting him over his shoulders and walking him all the way towards where, the rest of the students were. As it's at this point that All Might would appear, as he would have a gigantic, just angry expression on his face. But this is when All Might would see that Deku is there, and a lot of the villains that seemed that were there were gone. All Might would immediately teleport over, no, not teleport, but he would use blinding speeds as he would appear before All Might, he would appear before Deku and Aizawa. Sorry, my English is just awful right now. But he would appear before All Might, why did I just do that again? He would pretty much appear before Izuku and, Aizawa. As he would do this, he would ask Deku if he did this. As Deku would say that he did. And All Might would simply just put one hand over Deku's shoulders as he would say that he has so much potential, literally praising Deku. And when Deku hears these words, he would have a smile on his face as he just thinks that he's doing it. Little by little, he's finally going to be essentially growing as a hero, being acknowledged by the #1 pro hero, the person who pretty much built his entire childhood. This was big. This was bigger than big. And Deku just couldn't get over the fact that his idol, All Might, literally just praised him. Deku would be so excited as he would proceed to essentially have the cleanup all go down. And after this happens, when Deku's excitement would go down, he would begin to have one thought going through his head. Wait, what was that attack that I used? Deku would be wondering to himself what exactly it was that he used in order to slice down the Nomu, when Deku would realize that he felt a strange tingly sensation overcoming himself and his blades when at that moment of impact. It was as if a black aura coated his swords and helped him in slashing the Nomu apart, because Deku himself knew that if he would have simply ran at the Nomu with normal speed and strength, he probably would have not ended up having that same outcome, probably would have gotten punched away, and that would not have resulted in very good circumstances for Deku. After this, however, we would basically see Deku as, he's at home and he's simply sitting up wondering to himself what exactly that even was. When out of nowhere, Deku would pass out, and this is when Deku would wake up in a strange area. It would be it'd be looking so much different than his world. It'd be like this flower blossom garden, and Deku would see a man with green hair, a scar over his eye, and a robe. As he would smile and say, "So you're finally here." And Deku would look at Zoro as he would say, "Who are you?" Immediately, Zoro would stand up from his resting place as he throws the bottle of sake on the ground, and he would proceed to walk over towards All Might as he would say, "I'm the first. You're my reincarnation. My name is Zoro." As Deku would turn his attentions, he would just be like, "Reincarnation?" Zoro would then look towards Deku as he would say, "Without even ever being taught Haki, you were able to learn it. You were able to become even stronger than I was before I was to go train with the legendary swordsman, Mihawk." As Deku would hear all these words of praise coming from Zoro, but he would then turn towards Deku as he would say, "But you're nowhere near as strong as I was at the time of my death. And that's what we're going to be fixing. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about Haki." Deku, hearing this, would think that there's no way that he was literally just about to be taught by his own incarnation of himself. And Deku would smirk as he would say, "I'm ready." From this point, we would essentially have a full 1 year's worth of training in a little time skip, which I will be covering now. During this time, Zoro would essentially explain how to fully master observation Haki, armament Haki, and conqueror's Haki, because Deku does have access to that. And so, Deku would be learning how to master all these forms. Not only that, but Zoro would also refine all of Deku's previous sword movements, and he would end up teaching him all of Zoro's movements that he has in his arsenal. During this time, Deku would be a very, very, very fast learner. However, when it comes to, if he's as strong as Zoro quite yet, not exactly. He has become very powerful now though, but I don't think he'll ever be getting to that level, because in order to get to as far as Zoro has gotten, you need to be pushed a lot. And in this universe, this version of Deku really can't be pushed anymore. After receiving this gigantic power up, he'll probably never be pushed again. But with that said, after his training with Zoro is finally complete, Deku would literally ask Zoro what's next. And from this, Zoro would turn towards Deku's direction as he would sit down by a tree and sip a drink of sake, as he would smile and say that your training's over. And as he says that, his image would fade away, as Deku would hold a hand out and say, "Wait!" But before he could even ask anything, Deku would wake up. This entire 1 year's worth of training was literally had in one night. And for the following week, Deku would train in the real world, trying to master everything even more, even going further than what he already was. But Deku just doesn't know if he'll ever truly be as strong as the world's greatest swordsman, Zoro. And so we would basically have it to which Deku would continue learning the art of, the sword style that Deku uses, that Zoro uses. And from here, we will now have the UA Sports Festival. Now, obviously, the students will all return to class, where Aizawa would inform them all of, the sports festival, and Bakugo, being who he is, would still call everybody extras, leading to Class 1B essentially not liking Class 1A because of the fact that they think that Class 1A is just a bunch of stuck-ups who think that, they're all better than everyone, just like Bakugo does. But little do they know, most of Class 1A is actually extremely humble people who don't even think about, if I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you, type mentality. So they're all pretty much wrong, but they don't know this. And so we would essentially have the sports festival going down. Now, when they all arrive, of course, Midnight is actually going to tell Deku that he actually has to be giving a speech. Deku, thinking that this is going to be a little bit of a drag, would simply go over as he would proceed to essentially say, "Alright, so what do I do?" From here, Midnight would turn toward Deku's direction and she would say, "Just say whatever it's on your mind." Deku would walk up to the podium as he would simply say, "My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I'm going to be the greatest hero, the first quirkless hero." As he would simply walk off the stage and say that, "Oh yeah, and I'm gonna win this festival," dropping the mic and walking off, as everybody in the crowd would go silent and people would begin to mutter, saying, "Is he really quirkless?" With people saying, There's no way a quirkless kid got into UA. And everybody would just start wondering to themselves what's going on. Immediately, quirkless kid in the sports festival would begin trending on Twitter, Instagram, literally anywhere that you guys can think of. People would start essentially making it go trending. And a YouTuber by the name of Zether would start covering it as well, talking about how some kid named Izuku Midoriya, who happens to be the reincarnation of Zoro, is, basically declaring that he's gonna win the sports festival. This is some joke, right? Yeah, right. Nope, not a joke. After this, Deku would essentially proceed to get ready for the following events that come. As soon as this is said, Midnight would proceed to spin the wheel as she would proceed to announce to everybody what they are going to be doing. She would proceed to say that first, they're going to be having a race. Deku would smile, thinking that, speed? That's not an issue for him, as essentially, as soon as Midnight would blow the little starting pistol, Deku would blitz out of there so fast that Todoroki's ice wasn't even able to reach him. Bakugo wasn't able to perceive his movements, and Deku was at the finish line before Bakugo and Todoroki were even anywhere near him. Deku cleared the entire obstacle course in literally 20 seconds. That's being very, very generous if we're talking about Zoro. Alright, very generous. 20 seconds and he would clear the entire thing. Going over robots, going over the landmines with them actually exploding behind him. Deku would have cleared the entire thing of the obstacles, and after this, he would simply stand as he would say that he's gonna win. Immediately, people would start asking, saying, "This kid, there's no way this kid's quirkless. He must have some sort of speed quirk. Ain't no way they're gonna believe some kid this powerful is quirkless." And they'd be wrong to believe that, because Deku is in fact quirkless. And this is when the next event would begin. However, seeing as the events of the last event played out, Bakugo and Deku, since they're not like hating each other in this version, Bakugo would walk over to Deku as he would say, "Hey, Deku, how about me and you team up? And then, for the last challenge, we'll go all out against each other." Deku would turn towards Bakugo's direction as he would say, "You're on." And after this, Bakugo would chuckle at Deku as he would say, "Alright, so I'll be the rider." Deku would say, "No objections here," as Bakugo would get on top of Deku, and he would proceed to essentially say, "So who else is going to be on our team?" Immediately, Uraraka would walk up, and she's like, "Can I join you, Deku?" And Deku would look at Uraraka as he would say, "I don't see why not." Immediately, Uraraka would join the team, as Deku would say, "Alright, so we need one more person." This is when Mei Hatsumi would approach, and she would begin to pretty much say, "Hey, so, can I join?" Since Deku was a winner, and Deku would just be like, "Sure, we need another anyways." She would basically give them the boots, and this is when they would proceed to pretty much stand there, with the 10 million point headband, as well as Bakugo's second place headband, and Todoroki is like really fiending for those headbands, you know what I mean? But Todoroki would actually think that it would probably be the best course of action to maybe save them for the end, so that once like it's like the last couple of seconds, Todoroki can rush at them, take the headband from them, and that way they won't have enough time to take it back from him. This is the plan that Todoroki is basically going to be banking on for the cavalry battle, and for the entirety of this thing, we basically have Deku and Bakugo's team basically clearing a bunch of other teams and causing a bunch of other eliminations, knocking other teams over, with Bakugo's and his aggressive nature pretty much leaking out quite a lot. By the end and the last 30 seconds, Todoroki would finally rush towards their direction, but Deku would actually let a certain amount of aura leak, as he would use a very small amount of Conqueror's Haki, saying, "Stay back." Todoroki's eyes would widen as he would proceed to say that maybe it's not the best idea to go that way. His team would rush away as he would continue just collecting small headbands, taking another team's headband, and basically assuring his spot in second place. After this, we would now have the battles, to which these battles are kind of not going to be very important in the grand scheme of things. Deku would essentially look at, the chart, the leaderboard, as it would say that the first battle is going to be Izuku Midoriya versus Shinso. And after hearing this, Deku would smile as he would proceed to walk over towards the ring in the center, walking in there with his 3 swords in hand. Deku would see as a purple-haired boy would walk into the stands, and he would basically see this kid just like step into the ring. Immediately, Deku would say, "Let's have a good fight, yeah?" As Shinso would turn towards Deku's direction and say, Sure thing, kid." He would be actually questioning if this kid is actually quirkless. Deku would look at Shinso as he would say, "Let's have a good fight." Shinso would say, "Sure." And as soon as the battle would start, Shinso would say, "Are you actually quirkless?" Deku would stop before he even rushes at Shinso and say, "I am." But right as he says that, Deku would actually be snapped into the same place where Zoro was at before he faded away. And Deku would see a small remnant of Zoro's figure. He would basically see like Zoro's spirit, similar to how he basically ended up seeing his sister and father's. And this is when Deku would snap out of it, as he would proceed to basically stab himself to break out of Shinso's mind control. It's at this point that Deku would turn towards Shinso as he would say, "So we're using cheap tactics, huh? Alright, since you're gonna make me walk off the ring willingly, how about I make you walk off the ring willingly as well?" He would rush at Shinso and begin to project so much bloodlust onto him that Shinso would begin to walk back slowly, and Deku would start taking slow steps towards Shinso's direction, as Shinso would just see this beast standing before him, this immovable object, this behemoth of power. As Shinso falls off the ring and says, "What are you?" Immediately, Shinso would walk out of the ring as he would go towards the waiting room, and this is where Todoroki would appear. Inside of the room, he would walk over towards Deku as he would say, "I can't wait to fight you. But if there's one thing I'm gonna tell you, it's that I know you're strong, but you're still gonna lose to me. And I will do it only using half of my power." As soon as Deku hears this, he would start breaking into this laughter, as he would just begin to laugh in Todoroki's face, going, "Haha! Did you really just say that, bro?" Todoroki would look at Deku as he would say, "What?" And Deku would turn towards him as he would say, "You're gonna beat me with half of your power. You're gonna beat me half of your power." Repeating this 2 times towards, Todoroki's direction, as Todoroki would say, "I will. It's not something that I might do, it's that I will." As Deku would laugh, he would just turn towards Todoroki saying, "Sure thing, buddy," as he would just have Todoroki walk out of there, and Bakugo would be at the doorway as he would say, "Well, you're not going to be getting past him, so I just came over to wish him good luck on your battle. So get out of my way, Icy Hot." He would shove Todoroki, as Todoroki would let out some ice with Bakugo some explosions, but this is when suddenly All Might would walk in the corridor and say, "Hey, settle down, save it for the matches." As it's at this point that Bakugo would go and have his first battle against Uraraka. After this, Todoroki would have his battle against Zoro, and this is when the battle between Deku versus Todoroki would ensue. Immediately, Todoroki would look at Deku as he would simply say that, he's going to be beating him with nothing but half of his power. That's a promise. Deku would look at Todoroki's direction as he would simply laugh and say that for him, he won't even need to use half his power. As Todoroki would simply be angered at that, but Deku would use observation haki to pretty much see a couple of seconds into the future, calming his mind. As he would see about 2 seconds, seeing that Todoroki was about to shoot a gigantic iceberg, Deku immediately proceeded to take out one sword, as that's all he needed. He grabbed his left hand as he grabbed for the sword, and he pretty much slashed in midair. As that slash of wind, the wind pressure coming off of Deku's sword was enough to cause all of the gigantic iceberg, to pretty much split down the middle. And as soon as Todoroki sees this, his eyes would widen as he would stomp his feet down at the ground saying, "No, stay away." Immediately, Deku would simply smile as he would essentially teleport right behind Todoroki, essentially using a move so similar to the body flicker that by the time that he was behind Todoroki, the ice had barely stomped down on the ground and started coming. Deku would hit the back of Todoroki's head with his blade as Todoroki would just drop down to the ground fully unconscious. This is when Endeavor would go over the railing and say, "Shoto!" as Deku would simply smile, holding his blade up into the air, with everybody freaking out going, "Oh my god!" They're all just having such insane reactions like, "Is this kid really quirkless?" And President Mike would literally come over the inner speaker as he would say he truly is quirkless. All of the records point to him having no quirk. As this is when everybody would just be like, "Hey, no way that this kid is quirkless doing all this." Sorry guys, I just dropped my key, but people would start basically thinking that quirkless people might actually have a chance of becoming heroes now. Deku has started something which essentially tells people who are quirkless that they can do it too. And Deku would smile as he would say, "Exactly." This is when Deku would proceed to simply walk off of the stage as he would wait for the next battles to commence, and this is when he would finally have his final battle against Bakugo. As Bakugo would go into the arena smiling, he would simply look at Deku right in his eyes as he would say, "Don't hold back on me, you got it?" As Deku would turn towards Bakugo's direction, he would simply say, "So you want me to use my full power?" Bakugo would smile as he would say, "Exactly. Don't hold back even an inch, because if you do, I'll know it." And Deku would simply say, "I respect that. And out of respect for you, I'll use my full power." Deku would proceed to simply look down at the ground as he would begin to charge an attack, a very powerful one at that. This is when Deku would essentially proceed to look at Bakugo's direction as he would take 3 swords to begin to spin them in a weird pattern, as it's at this point that Bakugo would just be wondering what's going on. And as soon as the match would start, it would be over. Deku would use the 3 swords secret style, secret skill, billion-fold world trichologism. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I don't really watch One Piece like that, so I'm kind of just going off the top with these names. So if I'm butchering this stuff, then sorry about that, buddies, but you can't do a thing about it. So yeah, Deku would use that attack, and in case you guys are wondering why I'm having him use this, because I'm on this one website which basically just says Zoro's top 10 strongest attacks. Don't blame me too hard down below in the comments, you Zoro tards. But yeah, after this, we basically have Deku blitzing at Bakugo's direction as he would cut Bakugo down, leaving 3 slashes on his chest. As Bakugo would fall down to the ground, his pupils would turn white, fall down onto his knees as he would just hit the ground. It's at this point that Deku would aim his blade straight at All Might as he would say, "Now I want to fight the big guy." All Might would smile as the crowd would go wild saying, "Oh my god! He just challenged All Might!" Everyone's going insane, just like, "There's no way, no way, no way!" And All Might would smirk as he simply just smiles and says, "Sure, why not?" He would land down in a superhero fashion as he would simply say, "You ready?" Deku would smile as All Might would say he's gonna take it light on him. Deku, hearing this, would honestly feel pretty disrespected and say, "You know what, All Might?" As he would throw one of his swords at All Might's direction, he would say, "You use that." As All Might would simply say, "Are you sure?" And Izuku would simply turn towards All Might as he would say, "It won't make a difference, All Might. I know exactly what you're gonna do before you do it." Immediately, Deku would breathe in as for a second he would basically use his observation haki to pretty much predict what's about to happen. He would then move to the right as he would say now, as immediately All Might would punch at his left side. Deku would dodge out of the way, step back 2 times as All Might throws another 2 haymaker punches, with the wind pressure almost blowing Deku back. His hair would stand on his tips as Deku would simply smile, thinking that, yeah, this is definitely gonna be hurt. As it's at this point that Deku would jump up into the air, with All Might simply thinking that, this is going to be super easy. This is when Deku would basically just simply create a brand new attack. Deku with 2 swords would simply bring the blades down right into All Might's shoulders, causing All Might to just basically get brought down straight to his knees. And in case you guys are wondering if he's using the blades, no, he's literally using the hilt of the sword to bang on All Might's shoulders and like just to smash it down onto him, as All Might would fall down to the ground like just instantly. Deku would have used armament haki in that attack as well as Conqueror's haki, which caused All Might to simply be in a weakened state as that stands. And as soon as Deku smashed the swords down, All Might's body straight fell limp to the ground as his body de-transformed into his weakened state. Deku, seeing this, would widen his eyes as he would say, "What have I done?" But as soon as this would happen, we would see All For One, who's actually watching the sports festival, smile as he would say Kurogiri. And immediately Kurogiri would teleport All For One to the sports festival, as All For One would smile saying, "Thank you." He would aim his hand straight at Deku's direction as he would shoot these gigantic black tendrils at his direction, to which Deku would slice, and Deku would say, "What are you doing here? Who are you?" Immediately All For One would say, "Thank you for taking out the greatest threat. Now I can kill everybody. Now this world will fall down to my knees." Deku would realize the severity of what he had just done. The crowd would be completely silent, and everybody would be looking right at Deku's direction, simply terrified, thinking that this is the end. But it's at this point that Deku would look at, All For One's direction, saying, "This is not how it ends." And immediately a bunch of pro heroes would jump down as they would say, "Protect All Might." A bunch of heroes would say, "Get the civilians out of here." As All For One would smile, saying, and he would basically let out a bunch of bloodlust, which would cause a bunch of heroes and civilians to pretty much be knocked out instantly. Deku would stand right in the middle of this all, as he would simply say that that's all he has. Deku at this point would simply say that he cannot let his failures be the cause of so many people's deaths, as Deku would go over towards All Might, grabbing the sword that he had given him, as he would put it in his teeth, gripping it and just tightening his teeth as over the sword, as Deku would proceed to essentially look at All For One's direction, as he would say, "This ends now." He would look at All Might's body on the ground, as he would say, "If it's any compensation, All Might, I hope this can help." And immediately Deku would say, "Purgatory, Onigiri!" As immediately he would blitz towards All For One's direction so fast, using all of his Conqueror's haki that he has, as he would cut All For One down, who at this point was completely unable to use any of his quirks because Aizawa had jumped down and used his erasing quirk. Deku would literally cut All For One straight through his chest, as one of his blades would have punctured his ribs, another his heart, and another his lungs. All For One would fall straight down onto the ground, as Deku would stand above him saying that that's it. Immediately, Deku would fall onto one knee with one blade holding him up, as he would stand up and hold one of his swords up into the air in an All Might fashion, saying that this battle has been won. And a giant helicopter was actually broadcasting this entire thing go down, would immediately begin to broadcast this into so many homes. This is where we would have Deku's just accomplishments going crazy in the media, as it's at this point that talks about whether Deku should be allowed to become a pro hero would start going wild. And this would actually be allowed. Deku would end up actually being given a pro hero license, as during this time, when it comes to picking his hero name, Deku would pick the hero name Zoro after the sports festival, and after the media calmed down with what happened during these events, All Might would come out to the public saying that, yep, this was his true form, explaining to everybody that this is how everything essentially ends. And after this, we would pretty much have Deku just staying around at UA, just kind of like still learning, since, you know, he may have the power to be a hero, but he does not have the experience quite yet. So he would still attend UA, and when it comes to his hero internship, Deku would actually not have to go into any person for his internship, because of the simple fact that Deku already has, well, the power that anybody could teach him, and he simply ends up working on getting even more powerful, also sleeping most of the time. When they return, they end up having their finals race, and they essentially have their forced training arc. All of these events don't actually end up going down with the League of Villains actually, you know, bothering them, and Shigaraki doesn't end up using the Nomus in a stupid rage against Stain, meaning that that incident never happens. Ida's brother would die, however, but Deku would actually vow to enact revenge on whoever it was that ended up, you know, hospitalizing Ida's brother. Actually, not even hospitalizing, but killing him completely. And so we basically, he hospitalized him, and Ida died. And so during this time when Deku got that news to him, he ended up finding Stain. And as soon as he did, he eliminated Stain without a second thought. And so after this, we basically have more events continuing on, as with the power that Deku now has in his possession, literally nobody can ever pose a threat to him. At one point, he would take the Tsunade agency, as we're just kind of going to skip a lot of the more boring aspects of My Hero Academia, as soon as we get here, the only real event that we have to cover is when Deku is patrolling with Mirio. Seeing as this is kind of the second last villain. When he is patrolling with Mirio, he would end up having a little girl with white hair rushing over him. She would have a little cute horn on her head. As Deku would see this little girl bumping into him, he would say, "Are you okay?" He would look down as he would just see this fear in her eyes. He would sense how much terror is coming off of this girl, and when he would look into the alleyway, he would see Overhaul. As soon as Deku places his eyes on Overhaul, an incredible amount of rage would come over Deku, as in a scene so like similar to when Shanks saved Luffy from the sea monster, we would have something so similar to that. Deku would look at Overhaul with this just look of straight like anger and like just bloodlust, and just like, if you don't leave, I will kill you type stuff. Overhaul, seeing this, would be terrified in one place, as Deku would tell Mirio to grab that girl and get out of here as far as he possibly can. Deku would immediately, without thinking, would blitz right at Shisaki's direction, as he would cut off his head and hold his hair, as he would quite literally hold Overhaul's head in his arms, throwing Overhaul's body into a trash can, saying that you are a literal piece of garbage who does not deserve just even having a funeral. You don't deserve having that at all, you piece of human garbage. That's literally what Deku would be thinking. And after this, Deku would walk off. As soon as this would happen, Deku would go on to be one of the greatest heroes of all time. Living until he was at the age of 120 years old, he continued being a hero for years to come, protecting the world. And with Zoro or Deku around, we would have like essentially so much peace in Japan. The areas which Deku was patrolling, no villain ever dared to step up, and with All for One gone, crime basically shot down at an exponential rate where less and less people were becoming heroes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where What If Deku Was Zoro's Reincarnation is going to be ending. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and I hope this was up to your liking in case you're like this big Zoro stan. I hope that in no part of the video did your vision get blurry, and you started basically banging down at the floor. You were just like, he messed it up, the pronunciation. Or, you know, you were just typing down your comment, unsubbing right now. Can't believe you didn't depict Zoro the way that I wanted you. Can't believe that you didn't give Deku Conqueror's Haki at the beginning. This is such a bad video. Dislike, like if you agree with me. You know, I hope that none of you guys ended up having that reaction. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed today's movie special for What If Deku Was Zoro's Reincarnation. And when it comes to the 30K special, guys, I honestly still have no idea what I'm going to be doing for that. We are approaching 30K so incredibly fast, and it would mean the absolute world to me, guys, if you guys were to go down below and smash that subscribe button as well as the like button, seeing as these movies, they take a long time to make, and a lot of people seem to forget that. And when they have a full movie, they never end up smashing the like button. They only end up getting about 1,000 likes, and it ends up messing out these movies in the algorithm. So I really would appreciate it if you guys were to go down below and smash that like button if at any moment in this video you found yourself being entertained. That being said though, guys, it has been your favorite milkman, and I am signing out. Peace.